Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to make a video about Warriors Orochi 5. I know that to the right of me is a poster of Warriors Abyss, but it is this game, Warriors Abyss, that did technically come out after Dynasty Origins, that made me think that a Warriors Orochi 5 is actually totally possible. Whereas before this game came out, I wasn't entirely sure that it was, quite frankly. After all, Warriors Orochi 4, even the Ultimate Edition, wasn't received really well. In fact, a lot of people came to the conclusion that that particular game was rushed out as a quick apology rather than a full game in its own right. And I can see how people could come to that conclusion. Now, I would say that that's primary focus is within the costume department, which I know is a bizarre place to point to, but it is true that when you look back at Warriors Orochi 3 Ultimate, that all the characters had multiple costumes. But I digress. In getting back to talking about Warriors Orochi 5 and why I feel like there is an opportunity for Koei Tecmo to make that game here recently, in the works, something, right? So let's start with where we are currently in terms of everything. So Warriors Orochi 4 leaves us off with an impressive roster. In fact, it won the Guinness World Record, having held the most amount of playable characters, that being 177 playable characters. That is just slightly below 30 shy of 200 playable characters, which is a lot to go shift through, quite frankly. So there's a reason I'm bringing up that number. Warriors Abyss is catching up, or has caught up slightly, with its current roster being a different type of game, a roguelike, of 127. Now that's me looking, because I have it on my other screen, looking at the weapon list and seeing that there are 127 unique weapons. So I'm assuming that means that there's 127 characters. And of course, they brought in Origins characters as the most recent update as of the making of this very video. But Warriors Abyss, despite coming out after Dynasty Origins, still takes from Dynasty Warriors 8, as well as Samurai Warriors 4 2, as well as Spirit of Sanada, in terms of its current roster. So, where can we go from here? First, there is the story to be concerned about. After all, both stories aren't particularly great, I would argue anyway. 3 revolves around time travel a lot. I mean, all of this is revolved around time travel, obviously. That being the mixture of Dynasty and Samurai Warriors in general is a sense of time travel. But the time travel is way more involved in 3's story. In comparison, 4 is the gods of a completely different era, mystic era, got bored and decided to go, fuck it, we'll draw them in. That's literally 4's story. So, not great either. But I think I would be amiss to say that I don't think that people stick around for either story, but rather the gameplay of both games respectively. Warriors Orochi 3 and 4, that being. Now, obviously, by a slight margin, I would argue that 4 does technically have a lot better weapon sets. You have more characters like Shimmy Sure figured out with his long blade instead of also holding a rapier. You have the Kale sisters. One of them have the dual fans back, and the other has these things called the Pugil Sticks, which I would argue is actually a fantastical weapon. And I actually do admire those weapons after playing with them enough. So, I would say for the most part, most of the characters got an improvement. Now, some of them are bizarre. Let's not get it twisted. Huang Gai and his boat. You still have all the arm cannon type weapons, the arm drill weapon. And of course, I wouldn't want to remove any of those. I would only make slight modifications to warriors' weapon styles that need that adjustment. For example, Lu Xun. He's maintained his dual swords since forever. He's never been without two swords. However, his combat style has drastically changed from his offset to where he is now. And where he is now, in the most recent Dynasty Warriors game, doesn't really feel like it even fits Lu Xun as a character. He has all the shadow stuff going on, which feels like it was kind of semi-ripped from Cao Cao. And it doesn't feel like it fits Lu Xun either, so it comes off as a bit baffling, even aesthetically, how it looks like. And then there's the actual swings themselves, which aren't particularly grand either. So those are characters I would look to fix in an upcoming Warriors game, Warriors Abyss 5. Warriors Orochi 5. And with that brings me to, so what would the story be this time? After all, after the gods were bored and doing whatever, I think a lot of people weren't particularly fans of that, and I'm not a particular fan of the overextension of the time traveling bit. So allow me to propose the next step. After Warriors Abyss, we learn that the creature from this very game, we take from this game, yes. The final boss from this game, we take that thing, and we give it a master that isn't Orochi, but Orochi serves this creature, whatever it is, as well. Yes, Orochi is not the final boss anymore. In fact, not only do Orochi serve it, but one of the gods does as well, say Hades, or one of those types, one of the higher beings. So obviously this being must be really strong. Now, I personally came to the conclusion of a Cthulhu-esque type boss, which could work, in a way. So, how this would function is that this Cthulhu-esque type enemy, the new final enemy of Orochi, would get all the warriors, with the exception of the starting 3 characters, all possessed, all under its thumb, all controlled. And it is up to the 3 starting characters to start to work their way back and reassess and retake their friends and allies back slowly, bit by bit. and leave it at that. They keep it straightforward. No time travel required, with the exception of them meeting up again. And no, it's just gods being fucking bored or whatever. It's actually an evil entity going, I can control all of these beings. Ah, and that's different from Orochi, who simply craves destruction. This is someone who, this being would be very possessive. I want more. I want, like, almost like a child wanting a heavy collection of things. So make that the evil entity in Warriors Orochi 5. And again, keep it that simple. Now, I would argue to maintain the structure of the chapter style from 3 and 4, but I would definitely shorten the story in terms of how it's represented via its chapters. Both games have 8 chapters to them and plenty of stages to choose from. But of course, there is a limited number of stages, so stages in both games inevitably repeat, because there aren't enough stages to, grant a story of this meaning of this size. So, what I would do, just as an aesthetic chapter separation, and to keep things numerically connected, I would make the story 5 chapters to match with the number 5 of the titled game. But each chapter is longer. Just make the chapters longer instead of making more chapters. That's the way I would separate it in terms of just pure aesthetics. Now, obviously, what you would take from each game, you would want to maintain the character select from Warriors Orochi 3. This is something that Warrior Orochi 4 abandoned and then had to re-pick up because the selection screen original from 4 wasn't great by any means. But there are actually small quality of life things that only one actually that I can think of from 1 and 2 that I would bring back to 5. That being, you can actually see your experience bar for each warrior character you're playing as. You could tell when you're going to level up as you're playing with that given character. As well as when you pick up an item, like the Fervor item, which is in 3 and 4. I don't remember it being in 1 or 2, but I digress. Let's say we maintain that item. You actually have another orb, like when you get an attack up, that tells you that you currently have fever. So that way you know when to start mowing down all the enemies around you to gain all that EXP that is about to flow into you. So that's one minor adjustment that I would make that's not in 3 or 4, I'm pretty sure anyway. So that's what I would keep from 1 and 2. What I would bring from 3 is its character selection. What I would bring from 4, obviously, is its roster and its weapon selection. With an impressive 177 roster, I think evening it out to be its complete game, I think, I know it's a big push to aim for 200. Now that is a bigger number by a landslide. That is an additional almost 30 characters. And more importantly, or equally as importantly, that means 33-ish, or 30, almost 30-ish type more weapons, unique weapons at that. So how do we adjust for that? Well, we'll get there in just a moment, because there is a solution, and it's actually a lot easier than you might think. But, for the sake of getting to that, I do think that one thing that Koei Tecmo should do, but it probably would never do, is try to aim for what each Ultimate Edition was, 3 and 4, and make that the base game of 5, so it doesn't need an Ultimate Edition. So, put it all on the table, make it all, everything you're gonna put in the game, make it in the base game. I think that is crucial to earn the title of being the best Warriors game up to date. The other thing it needs to do, at least in my opinion, is do the same thing for DLC. Now, if you're not familiar, Koei Tecmo is infamous, at this point I would argue, for having a slew of DLC, and this is guilty of all 3 and 4, and definitely their ultimate versions as well, of having way too many DLCs. I would say that 5, by comparison, should have the costuming from 3, and even a little bit more than that. And as well as having the opportunity to unlock music from prior games as well, and not have that be something that's either DLC or whatever. So in terms of costuming, just to get that out of the way first, I do like it that it is in 3 and 3 Ultimate respectively. I would bring that back. Obviously, Dynasty Warriors characters have more costumes if that's the case, technically speaking. But Samurai Warriors characters do also have costume changes. They have had multiple games. Some of them have less, some of them have more. So it would be a slew of figuring out which characters need what, but I don't think that that is the game's biggest problem. But again, that is something that I would say should be in the base game, and should be something that is unlocked through progression as it is in 3. That way, that sense of like, oh, we can pretty up our warriors to look how they used to look. Or if people are fans of the current looks, then by all means keep them by their current design. And as 4 does, I believe, yeah, I'm pretty sure 4 does this, when you select the character's costume, if you're not playing that character and if they're on the enemy side, they will still be in that costume. So that's a neat little small detail, but it is greatly appreciated. It makes you feel like those little choices you made for costumes has a little extra life to it, you know? And now that we have our story, as simple as it is, and I would keep it that simple, quite frankly, we can move on to, okay, the gameplay is going to probably play closer, I would argue, to 3 than 4. I would personally drop the whole magical god things you can summon in 4. I mean, those were neat. Some were overpowered, some were underpowered. So, like, I would argue to, instead of doing that, what I would do is for characters of the Dynasty Warriors side, I would add for them, in their 8 form, they currently have 2 EX combo attacks. I would add an additional EX attack to all of them, if not more than that. For Samurai Warriors characters, they already have the charge bit going on from 4. I think I would maintain that, just so that they're different enough from Dynasty Warriors characters. But I would also change Dynasty Warriors Musos to be more in line with their original Musos. That meaning the continuous attacks rather than, say, Huan Gai's grapple and then it like splashes out. Like Musos like that, I feel like can be shifted into a charge attack rather, or a part of his Huan Gai's EX attack. Like his first charge would be that the grapple of his previous Musou instead of his Musou. So that's how I would change that, to keep those little unique moves but change the Musos to be more powerful and extending to be more equivalent to one another. Because I would argue that Samurai Warriors specials are far superior as of currently to Dynasty Warriors characters by a landslide. And with that, we can now talk about... So we have our roster of 177. I wouldn't drop that number, obviously, but that does mean bringing all the gods back. So with 177... Again, my aim would be to get to 200. And that does sound, again, like a big number. However, I think that there are some obvious characters that you can bring in that have been introduced both in both Dynasty Warriors 9 and Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sanada, that some of them, at least the Sanada characters, are in Warriors Abyss. For example, and excuse me for turning my head to the other screen here, we have Masayuki Sanada, for example, and we have Sasuke, for an example. These two characters aren't in Samurai Warriors 4, they're in Spirit of Sanada, so I would add those two to the roster first and foremost. So that brings us from the 177, because those two aren't currently in the roster, to 179. We're already almost at 180. See how simple this is when you actually think about the characters. In terms of Dynasty Warriors 9 characters, I'm pretty sure there are at least 3 or 4 characters added in Dynasty Warriors 9 from 8. I would have to double check that. I don't remember the new characters from 9, they just don't stand out. But obviously what that would mean is that when you pull them backwards, from 9 to 8, is that each of them would have to be given a unique weapon from one another. And maybe one of them maintains the weapon that they already had if it's distinct enough. And there are even characters also missing from here, from even Warriors Abyss, but that's because they're in Samurai Warriors 5. For example, Yasuke is another character that I would add from Samurai Warriors. That brings us, forgetting the Dynasty Warriors number for a second, that brings us to a flat 180. Bring back in the Warriors from Dynasty Warriors 9, and I believe that is either 184 or 5, depending on how many were added from 8 to 9. So let's just we'll lowball it and say 184 is our current roster due to the Dynasty Warriors characters. So with 184, that is still quite a bit of ways from the full 200 that we would be seeking here. And that can bring in the god and mystic characters that aren't in 4 either. For example, Poseidon isn't there. There's another one for you. And the gods that aren't mentioned but are very prevalent in the god realm of, you know, more Greek or Roman, whatever, but over there. Anyway, so that would probably get us to maybe, depending on how many gods you want to add, let's just say, again, let's softball it to be like 187. Like, say there were 3 gods missing. I don't know how many there were. Now, of course, Warriors Orochi 4 brought back Ryu, Hayabusa, but did not bring back Rachel, so there's another character. The other Dead of Alive characters, Ayane, another one. In fact, they're all here in Warriors Abyss. Ayane and Momoji, there's the other one. So that's another 3 females for your roster picking here. So that gets us pretty close to 190. And this isn't even doing any new characters. This is just bringing in newer characters and giving them either a Dynasty Warriors 8 treatment or giving them the Samurai Warriors 4 treatment in Yosuke, like figuring out how to make his gloves work. Maybe they give him the gloves from from Origins. Maybe they give him that combat style, right? Who knows? But point being is that we are at the 190 mark at this juncture, or pretty much. And Zulia Wan, by the way, is also in Warriors Abyss, so there's another pick for you. They figured out how to do him in Warriors Abyss. They primarily give him the sword, but he brings out other weapons depending on which charge he does, so he either plays like Loki or the other Perseus. I forget which one that does the multiple weapon thing in his charges, but he plays kind of like that in Warriors Abyss, so there's another character for the roster. So that's about 191. If all my other numbers were, again, I'm softballing downward, not upward. And just to make the matters interesting, I would also bring in the NPC from Warriors Abyss, the one that brought you into this world in the first place, and make that guy. He is a guy. And I forget his name. Enema. Make Enema a playable character. So that's 192. That would be, by the way, Enma would be your first new character, because he's currently an NPC. So that's where we can start to bring in other newer characters. But this game did bring in one character from 9 currently that isn't in Warriors Orochi 4, which was Dong Zhuo's daughter, Dong Bai. So that would be another roster pick for another character that you just pull back. And, you know, there's that one female from 9 as well, that other one. I think she's in Jin. She has the axe weapon, I forget her name, but there's that character. She's the only one I remember. I think there were like other strategists, mostly for 9. So that brings us roughly to 192 or 3, depending on what you would quantify those picks as. And then the other remaining, 8 characters? Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The remaining 7 characters can all be new. That's not a lot of characters left to be new, if you really think about it. And there are a lot of... Every time there's a new Dynasty Warriors game, there's always the... They should bring in this character and this character. Like, there are so many picks that you could strictly stick to Dynasty Warriors. But I do think that that would be unfair. Now, obviously, one of them are going to get more than the other. But that's why I put Enma in, but that is currently uneven, because I did say 7. So I might have to add in another god that I might be missing out on, outside of Poseidon, that can make it 6. So that way each roster gets 3 picks each. So I think Dynasty Warriors would get favored over Samurai Warriors, though, if it is 7. So let's go for the 7 and say that Dynasty Warriors just gets 1 additional pick. Whatever. I think it's fine. Again, I do think that Dynasty Warriors would get roster favoritism over Samurai Warriors, I think. So where to begin with that, if now we're strictly talking about new characters. There was always talks about having Meng Huo and Zhu Rong having an additional character, maybe a family member, one of their fellow kings, King Wu Tugu, someone of that stature, or I believe someone pointed out that they have a daughter, apparently. I actually didn't know that. So maybe having her as a character officially added. So that brings us down to 6. I would add... I would probably strictly stick to the other category and make their roster a little bit bigger. So that also meaning Wan Shao would probably get his 2 most loyal retainers that I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but they're the ones that are always with him. So that add those 2, her for other, that's 3 characters. And then the final pick would probably be to expand Zheng Jiao's forces by 1. So one of his top followers, one of those 2. I know he has like 2 top generals as well. And then the remaining 3 characters can be newer Samurai Warriors characters. Now, I'm not as familiar with who people are asking for in a Samurai Warrior 6. I mean, they already cut the roster in 4. But added Sasuke, so that one was already given. So, like, what additional characters outside of Yasuke could they conceivably have? Again, I'm not as up to date with the warriors of Samurai Warriors as of Dynasty Warriors that have low representation and mayhaps can expand upon one of the warring faction sides. So I'm not sure on those 3 picks, but I'm pretty sure like that wouldn't be too hard to figure out for more dedicated Samurai Warriors fans. At any rate, that's what would bring us, once we figured that number or those characters out, would bring us to the impressive new roster size of a flat but impressive 200. And again, having all costumes be in-game instead of DLC. Having all maps and hypotheticals be in-game instead of being DLC. Having all music from all the previous Warriors games, all of them, be brought over. And maybe if we can't pick any additional Samurai Warriors roster, maybe Spirit of Sanada's roster is impressive enough, let's just say that's the case, maybe we can bring in more guest characters, 3 guest characters. I also think that that's a slew of opportunity, and it could lead to some really impressive stuff, but that would definitely require other companies that have made Warriors collaborations before being open to having their characters repped in another game that isn't Hyrule Warriors or One Piece Warriors, or I think there's one for Gundam as well, Gundam Warriors, I think that's one. So yeah, there's definitely room for that, but I would press the highest X to doubt that guest characters would pop up in this, outside of the ones that were already brought over from Dead or Alive and would need to be brought back, since they were already brought back in Warriors Abyss, and you would want to maintain those characters because they're already a part of the lore at this point, so why drop them again, So there's that as an opportunity as well. If the 200 seems infeasible, it's not. It really isn't. And so you would have 200 unique weapons as a result of that, obviously. That does mean you might have to figure out some of the warriors here and there, but I don't think that's as hard as a concept as you might think, again. Since you have crazy characters like, again, one guy in his boat. If you can do that, there are weapons that have been pulled away from previous Warriors characters that you could just bring back. I'm just saying, the double maces of Dio Chan, Zhang Liao's previous Wyvern weapon, Wyvern blade, Samurai Warriors characters, the created characters, they have 4 unique weapons that aren't shared by any Samurai Warriors. Those are 4 additional weapons that you can give to any given character. For Dynasty Warriors, again, you have a lot of characters that have had weapons shifted a lot. Zhou Yu's Dancing River sword style, I only mention him because I know that there were a lot of sword users from Dongzhuo, Wanshao, Sun Jian, Sun Quan, or Xuan, Cao Cao, Liu Bei, all had singular swords up for the longest point. But Zhou Yu, who also had a sword, Gan Ning as well, just to name another. Zhou Yu, his dancing of the blade, that one was, I would argue, out of all of those, I would argue he's the most unique out of all of them. He stands out the most because of his movement rather than the weapon itself. So I would bring that weapon back purely because it's just that unique in its movement. And then you can, again, double maces, other weapons that have been pulled from warriors. So, yeah, I don't think 200, once you do that, I don't think 200 is actually going to be that hard to achieve when you actually boil it down. But I digress. So, 5 chapters, you always know when your characters are going to level up. You have 200 characters, but once you're done with the main story, what would keep you around? I hear maybe somebody asking. Well, I would argue that Gauntlet mode and Infinity mode of 3 and 4 respectively aren't the best of modes, and that might double up a question of, well, how would you unlock the character's ultimate weapons, which I would argue, going back to a more classical approach on that, would be more preferable. That being, when a character has a unique stance on the stage, like Lu Bu at when he's introduced at Hulao Gate properly, that's where he will unlock his weapon again. For example, on the hardest difficulty, Zhang Fei at his bridge, stages like this that signify this is their moment, this is their crucial moment. That could be, again, when they're introduced or when they're doing something really, really big. So split it between those two options, and I would do the same for the horses as well. From red hair, you would have to, again, probably get kills as Lu Bu in a stage that is, again, familiar to Lu Bu. You would bring in the other rare horses, Liu Bei's Hexmark, Cao Cao's Shadowrunner, stages for those horses as well. And what would replace Infinity Mode / Gauntlet Mode? And I think there's really only one option, really. Empire Mode. Yeah, instead of making a completely separate game and calling it Warriors Orochi Empires, which is a game I would also want to play, I'm just saying, you insert that mode into Warriors Orochi 5 as the final chef's kiss to make everything that you've unlocked have that replay value of infinity and beyond. Because, you guessed it, you get to create your own character with the roster weapon size of 200. And you do all of that with the goal of maybe this is where the gods go back and they, we don't have to make this story as complex. This mode would take place after you beat the main story, so I would actually have it so that this mode is locked up until you beat the main story. And then it is unlocked, and then, all the warriors are together, they're getting kind of bored, peace has been fulfilled, so somebody, maybe one of the gods, comes to the conclusion, hey, we're in this new crazy world, let's see who could come out on top, right? We'll just throw a little something together. You pick your warrior, you have your grouped scenarios, and I know what somebody might be thinking, but wait, China and Japan, those Empire games are separated by vastly different maps. Well, Warriors Abyss, by its very nature, changes that. It rearranges the very landscape itself. That's how this even all occurred in the first place. So, really, the map can actually look vastly different from either China or Japan. It would be a mixture of the two, quite frankly. And it would be a meshed land, maybe some degree of separation of, maybe there's a bridge that brings from one land to another. And of course, you can't forget about the stages that are the purely god-bound in Warriors Orochi 4, Bring those in, and now you have the Empire's mode with the most amount of maps, technically speaking, or objectively speaking, actually, I would argue. With that impressive roster of the 200, with your ability to make a new warrior, and so on and so forth. And of course, you have the Empire's options, you have the stratagems that you can use. I'd bring back some of the classics, like you can actually cut off an entire path, you can do pincer attacks, like you can actually use strategy. And of course, the enemies have the respawn value of what they have. You can kill officers or recruit them. You can either play as a free kind of doing whatever you want kind of character, or like a leader. you know, your typical Empire's shenaniganry. And of course, you get the little cutscenes like the whole marriage scene, or the whole you're being uber evil and you're grubbling all the money scene, or, you know, bringing these types of scenes back into the Empire's mode just so that that mode has some little extra bits and bobs that have been in previous Empire's games before that make playing the game, that mode anyway, replayable as all hell. With, of course, your new create a character style in that game. Obviously, you would want to bring in the create a character from the latter games so that you have way more options in terms of being able to make a warrior. And with that, I would honestly drop Abyss or Infinity mode and Gauntlet mode for this Empire mode. That's what I would do. Because I think Empires is the neatest of a separate game, but I would just insert it into Warriors Orochi 5. Again, this is all a long shot, but a stretch and a mile, if anything. Obviously, Koei Tecmo, as I just iterated, is nefarious for adding DLC. But I do think that is a problem of what came out of 4. I do think that when they slew in the DLC for that, and they didn't even try, even on that department alone, I think that was an indication that, like, I think people already are well aware that Koei Tecmo is infamous for having an overabundance of DLC. So stripping as much away of that as possible and putting it in the core game is something that I think fans would be surprised by. And again, I think that's what would easily give it the title of the best Warriors game up to date. But that would mean that Koei Tecmo would have to take that risk. That means that they would have to make all the costumes available in the base game. All the weapons available in the base game, all the hypothetical, stages that would be considered hypothetical a part of the base game. And with that, I think that would compile to be, again, the best Warriors game up to date. The best replay value, the most characters, in a mode that goes above and beyond of what would typically be a separate game, and just bringing that in. But again, at this point, at this juncture anyway, it does feel like more wish fulfillment than anything else. But maybe if we had other bigger YouTubers that are in the warrior space speak out about how that's what they want to see from Koei Tecmo, maybe, just maybe, they might actually start listening. I've heard other companies do it before, so it's not out of the realm of impossibility. I mean, it took a while for us to get a remaster of 3 to even be announced. And I do have reservations in terms of what I earlier talked about how many characters share a sword, and how many of those characters would go back to sharing a sword, which is why that's my only reservation about 3 as a remaster, is like, that's my biggest worry, are going back to those cloning-esque movesets. But I digress in saying, I think once, if whenever Dynasty Warriors 3 comes back on the map, whenever that happens, hasn't happened yet to my knowledge, but once that does happen, I think their next title should unequivocally actually be Warriors Orochi 5. It's been a while. Warriors Abyss proves that you can still take from 8 and, Dynasty Warriors 8 and 4 respectively, and then pull back from 9, and then pull back from Samurai Warriors 5 in that case. Your characters like Yosuke and the lady with the axe that I mentioned from Jin. And then just bring those over into this game. And I think with that alone, though it is a big ask, I think it is an ask worth asking. I think it is about time that we stopped getting fumbles like Dynasty Warriors 9 in and of itself. I think it is about time we stop getting fumbles like Samurai Warriors 5, because that game also cut down its roster by a significant margin, also brought back the big cloning issue that has been, re-brought back in that very game. So I do think that Warriors Orochi 5 could both serve as a proper apology and a proper game. Because that is what I feel like Warriors Orochi 4 missed out on being, even in its ultimate version, is giving the fullest to what the game could be, filling it to the pact with everything in your being. That, to me, is what a game is worth the full price of admission should be. And, if Koei Tecmo can't, if they are like, we need our DLC, then fine. I'm willing to even entertain this. That the DLC isn't costumes from previous games, but maybe some fun, like, maybe there's a holiday-themed costume pack, or, like, whatever. But it has to be something that doesn't currently exist. That is my exception. It can't be something that has existed before. So even the Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors swapping costumes, they can't do that again. That should actually be in the base game as a costume decision for each character as well. In the base game, not DLC, base game. The DLC, if Koei Tecmo can't, refrain from doing DLC, then make sure that that DLC is stuff outside what has been presented in previous Warriors game. Now, this is where I would argue for this. This is where I would argue if there was a space for DLC characters, for those to be the new guest characters, from Hyrule Warriors, getting someone like Link, getting someone like Luffy from Pirates Warriors, I think those could be safely put to DLC. I think you can reach that 200 mark without those characters, quite frankly, but yeah. But anyways, that is my big video for how to make Warriors Orochi 5 the best Warriors game of all time. And if you ended up enjoying this video, then, and if you're a Koei Tecmo fan especially, then make your own video, especially if you see this and you're one of the bigger content creators out there. Let Koei Tecmo, throw out the whispers. Let them know that that's what we kind of want to see from them moving forward. I think that's the best way to actually get this thing starting to roll. I didn't even mention if it needed an English dub, see? And I know that's something that both 3 and 4 don't have, but I digress. Anyways, if you ended up liking this, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. Want to head you to my petition about small YouTubers to get to my PayPal. Want to help support me and my channel directly, and third to my Discord server. You can join collab shields, all that cool stuff for free. Now, until next time, everyone, bye-bye.